I just finished a quiet lunch, the kind that used to bring me peace. The house was still, just the way I liked it. But then, my phone rang, and everything changed. It was Alice. I hadn't heard from her in months, maybe longer. Her voice on the other end sounded distant, colder than I remembered. I braced myself, knowing that our strained relationship wasn't getting any better. But nothing could have prepared me for what she said next. "How could you abandon me like that?" Her words hit me like a slap. My stomach dropped, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. "Abandon you?" I echoed, my mind racing to catch up with her accusation. My voice trembled as I spoke, unsure of what to even say next. I thought back to everything I had done for her. I had been there through the hard times, always trying to provide, always trying to support her. And now, this? She didn't pause, didn't even let me speak. "You left me when I needed you most. You weren't there. You never were." The pain was immediate, sharp, like a blade through my chest. Abandonment? I had tried to be the father she needed. Yes, there had been distance over the years. Life had gotten complicated. But abandonment? How could she say that? How could she believe it? I could hear the bitterness in her voice. It was as though she had already made up her mind, like she had been carrying this weight for far too long. But I had never been given a chance to explain. The words stuck in my throat as I tried to respond, but I couldn't find the right ones. The years of estrangement, the silence, the unspoken pain, none of it had been addressed. Now, it all seemed to crash down on me at once. "Why would you say that?" I finally managed, my voice raw. "You know I never abandoned you." But it didn't matter. Her mind was made up, and there was no room for me in it. I could hear the finality in her voice, the coldness of someone who had already walked away without a second glance. The years of loving her, raising her, all of it now seemed worthless. All the sacrifices, the late nights, the financial struggles to make sure she had what she needed. None of it mattered. "You don't get it, do you?" Alice continued. "You've ruined everything. I'm better off without you." The words stung more than I can put into words. Better off without me? I couldn't comprehend it. I could feel my chest tightening, the reality of what was happening starting to sink in. This wasn't just an argument. This was the end of something I didn't even know was still hanging by a thread. I stood there, holding the phone in my hand, not knowing what to do, not knowing how to fix this. How did we get here? I replayed every moment in my mind, every time I tried, every time I reached out. Had it really been enough? Had I truly failed her? Alice was gone. That much was clear. But I was left standing in the wreckage of everything I thought I had built with her. It wasn't just the pain of her words. It was the devastation of realizing that everything I had done to hold on to her, to keep her close, meant nothing in the end. The silence between us stretched on, but I couldn't break it. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know if there was anything left to say. The call ended, and I stood in that same spot, staring at the phone as though it could somehow give me the answers I was searching for. But it couldn't. There was nothing left but the weight of her accusation, her rejection, and the emptiness of knowing I had no idea how to fix what was broken. Have you ever been misunderstood by someone you love? What did you do? I don't know what made me decide to go up to the attic that day. Maybe it was the silence after the phone call, or maybe it was just the weight of the past pressing down on me. But there I was, rummaging through boxes of old things, half-forgotten memories, collecting dust in the corners of the house I had once shared with my wife, Helen. The attic smelled musty, as it always had, a mix of old books and years of things we had never quite let go of. I shuffled through the boxes, each one a time capsule of our lives, the old toys, the family photos, the little keepsakes from places we had been. But it was one particular box that caught my eye. It was tucked in the back, barely noticeable, as if it didn't belong. I pulled it down and opened it slowly, uncertain of what I'd find. Inside, nestled between stacks of old receipts and a few worn books, were a stack of letters, tied together with a faded red ribbon. My heart skipped a beat when I saw them. I knew these letters. Helen had always written letters, especially during the hard times, but I hadn't seen these before. She had kept them hidden away, as if they were something she didn't want me, or anyone else, to see. I sat down on the dusty floor and carefully untied the ribbon. The letters were old, the paper yellowed with time, and the ink faded but still legible. As I began to read, I could feel the past coming back, each word a glimpse into a part of our life that had been buried for so long. The letters were written during the years when Alice was a child, during a time when I had been distant, consumed by work and my own struggles. Helen's words were raw, filled with emotion, and yet I hadn't known any of this at the time. She spoke of the burden of raising Alice on her own, of the times when I had been absent, physically and emotionally, when Alice had needed me the most. Helen had written about the loneliness she felt, the weight of carrying the family's problems by herself, and how she wished things could be different. There were mentions of struggles I had never fully understood, of the toll it took on her to keep up the facade of a perfect family when, in reality, we were falling apart. She spoke of trying to protect Alice from the truth, from the tension that had built between us, all while trying to shield her from the harsh reality of our circumstances. As I read, the pieces started to fall into place. The things I hadn't seen before, the moments I had been too blind to notice, suddenly became clear. Helen had carried so much, and I had never known. I had never understood the depth of her pain, nor had I realized how much she had kept from me in an attempt to protect Alice. Now, reading these letters, I could see things from Helen's perspective, how she had tried, in her own way, to hold the family together, even when it seemed like I was already gone. I had thought my absence was due to work, but there had been so much more at play, so much that I had never known. The realization hit me like a wave. Alice's accusation, her anger at me for abandoning her, it was all coming from a place of pain that she had never fully understood. The truth was, she didn't know the half of it, and now, neither did I. Helen had kept these letters hidden, perhaps to protect me, but maybe she had also hidden them from herself. I sat there for a long time, the letters still in my hands, my heart heavy with grief and regret. So many things had gone unsaid, and now it was too late. Helen was gone, and Alice had built a narrative in her mind that I could never undo. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of the past settling around me, and I finally understood. It wasn't just about the accusation. It was about everything that had happened before, everything that had been left unsaid, buried deep beneath the surface. And now, it was all coming back to haunt me. Have you ever found something that changed your view of the past? What did you do with that knowledge? I sat there for what felt like hours, reading the letters over and over again. The words my wife, Helen, had written were raw, full of emotion, and so different from the woman I thought I had known. As I read, I started to see things through her eyes, the eyes of a woman who had carried so much and never let me see the weight of it. In the letters, Helen talked about the early years of Alice's life, those first few years when I had been so distant. She spoke of sleepless nights, of feeling like she was alone, even when I was in the house. She wrote about the constant tension between us, how my work consumed me, leaving her to shoulder everything else. But it wasn't just the physical exhaustion that wore her down. It was the emotional burden, too. I never realized how much she had struggled, how much she had been carrying on her own. There were moments in the letters where she questioned herself, wondered if she was doing enough, if she was making the right choices for Alice. She never wanted to burden me with her doubts, especially when I was already so far removed from the family. She had made it her mission to protect Alice, even when it meant sacrificing her own emotional well-being. She didn't want our daughter to see the cracks in our marriage, to feel the strain of our arguments or the distance between us. Helen had tried to shield Alice from the things that I didn't see, the pressures of life, the financial strain, and the emotional isolation. Helen had kept it all from her, thinking that the less Alice knew, the safer she would be. It was heartbreaking to think that in trying to protect her, Helen had inadvertently created the very feelings of abandonment that Alice was now carrying. As I read further, it became painfully clear that Helen had been desperate to keep the family intact, even when I had checked out emotionally. She had hoped, in her own way, that things would get better, that I would come around, that I would finally see the toll I was taking on everyone. She wanted to give Alice a sense of normalcy, a sense of security, even when she herself was falling apart inside. But I had been blind. I didn't see it. I didn't see how much my absence was hurting them both. I didn't realize that Helen had been carrying the weight of our broken marriage, all while trying to keep up the illusion of a happy family for Alice. Reading those letters now, I realized how much was left unsaid between us. Helen had never asked for help. She had never let me know just how desperate things had become. I had always thought we were on the same page, that we were in this together. But now, in the silence of these letters, I understood just how much I had missed. I had been absent in every way that mattered, and Helen had borne the burden alone. The more I read, the more I realized that Alice's anger at me wasn't just about me leaving. It was about everything that had been left in the shadows, the things I had never seen, the struggles Helen had faced on her own. Alice hadn't been abandoned by me as much as she had been abandoned by the absence of understanding, the absence of communication between us all. And that's when the guilt really hit me. The daughter I had tried so hard to connect with now had a story in her mind, one where I had failed her. But the truth was, I had failed her, and I had failed Helen too. How could Alice ever understand that the abandonment she felt was born from a larger, more complicated story than she had ever known? How could she ever see the truth behind the walls we had all built to protect each other? Do you think a parent's sacrifice should be recognized by their children? Why or why not? I could feel my hands trembling as I walked up to the front door. I hadn't seen Alice in weeks, not since that phone call. And even though I had hoped this conversation would go differently, I knew in my heart that it wouldn't be easy. The moment I had been dreading was finally here. I knocked once, twice. A long pause followed before I heard her footsteps from the other side. The door opened slowly, and there she was, Alice, standing in front of me with that same cold look in her eyes, the look that had haunted me since she first accused me of abandoning her. "Alice, we need to talk," I said, my voice steady but thick with emotion. I wasn't sure what I was expecting, but it certainly wasn't the look she gave me, one of guarded resentment, as if she had already decided what this conversation would be. "I don't have anything to say to you, Dad," she replied, her tone flat. "You've already said enough." My heart clenched at the words, but I pushed through. This had to be done. "I found something. Letters that your mother wrote. She kept them hidden in the attic. I think they'll explain a lot about what happened when you were young, about the struggles we went through as a family." I held up the letters, the ones I had read over and over, trying to make sense of them, trying to make sense of us. I wanted to explain, to show her that my absence, my emotional distance, wasn't because I didn't care. It wasn't because I wanted to leave her. But Alice didn't take the letters. She didn't even reach for them. Instead, she crossed her arms and looked at me with disdain. "So now you want to throw Mom's letters in my face? You think that makes everything okay? You think you can fix all of this by giving me a few papers?" The frustration boiled over inside me. I had spent so much time trying to figure out how to get through to her, how to make her see the truth, but she wouldn't let me. She refused to. "You think I abandoned you, Alice?" I said, my voice rising despite myself. But I didn't. I wasn't just some absent father who didn't care. I was lost too. I was drowning in my own way, trying to keep everything together when your mother was struggling in silence. I didn't see it, but I was there. She laughed bitterly, shaking her head. "You were never there. You were always too busy with your own life, with your own problems. Don't try to make this about her, Dad. You left me. I had to grow up without you, and no letter can fix that." The words hit harder than I expected. I wanted to shout, to tell her she was wrong, that I had tried, but the truth was, she didn't want to hear it. No explanation would ever be enough. She was so sure of her own version of the story, so certain that I had abandoned her, that she couldn't see anything else. I stood there, feeling the walls close in around me, the years of silence stretching between us like a chasm I couldn't cross. The anger in me started to shift into something darker, something more desperate. "I don't know how to make you understand," I said, my voice shaking. "I don't know how to fix this, Alice. I can't change what's already happened, but I can't just let you believe that I didn't love you." She stepped back, her face hardening. "It's too late for that." And in that moment, I realized what I had feared all along. This gap between us, this emotional distance, might never be bridged. I left her house that day with a heavy heart, knowing that no matter how many explanations I gave, no matter how much I wanted her to understand, I couldn't make her see what I saw. I couldn't make her feel what I felt. The emotional divide between us had become unbridgeable. Have you ever tried to make things right with someone who refused to listen? How did you feel? The phone call with the lawyer was my first step into a world I never thought I'd have to face. Sitting in the small, sterile office, the weight of everything pressing down on me, I could feel my hands shaking as I listened to Thomas Branson explain the complexities of what lay ahead. "You've been emotionally hurt, and I understand that, but we need to be clear about what's at stake here," he said, his voice calm, professional. "We need to think about how we protect your financial interests moving forward." Protect my financial interests? My mind was still on Alice. The accusations, the rejection, the unbearable emotional toll. But Thomas was already diving into the legal specifics. I had tried so hard to keep things civil, to reason with Alice, but this was now about more than just family. This was about safeguarding myself. Thomas continued, outlining what I was facing: potential manipulation of my finances by Alice, and the danger of her using the power of attorney to take control of my assets. He spoke about fraud, elder abuse, and the delicate nature of proving such claims. The more he explained, the more I realized just how far Alice had gone, and how much damage she could still do if I didn't act quickly. I sat there, listening, feeling more overwhelmed by the minute. The emotional pain from the rejection was still raw, but now there was this other layer, legal, cold, and procedural, that I had to contend with. I wasn't just fighting for my dignity anymore. I was fighting for my security, my future. "Are you prepared for this to go public?" Thomas asked, his eyes steady. "If we move forward, it'll involve legal filings, possibly even a court case. It'll take time. It could get messy." Messy. That word lingered in my mind. I hadn't expected this battle to be clean, but hearing the reality of it, hearing how much it might cost, both emotionally and financially, was a punch to the gut. Still, I couldn't stop now. I couldn't just sit back and let Alice take what was mine. I needed to protect myself. "I'm prepared," I said, even though I wasn't entirely sure I was. I didn't have a choice anymore. We discussed next steps, gathering evidence, reaching out to financial institutions, and drafting the legal documents needed to contest Alice's actions. It felt like my whole life was being put under a microscope. My every decision, every mistake, now part of a process that had taken on a life of its own. The pressure began to build. The more we talked, the more my anxiety escalated. The weight of the situation started to feel suffocating. This wasn't just about Alice's betrayal. It was about me standing up for what little I had left. It was about trying to reclaim some measure of control over my life. The lawyer's calm demeanor offered no comfort. As he spoke, I could feel my resolve hardening. I had to do this. I had no other choice. But the road ahead was long, and the emotional toll of fighting my own daughter over what I had worked so hard for was heavier than anything I had expected. It wasn't just the financial strain I had to deal with. It was the personal devastation of facing the truth that I had been betrayed on so many levels. I left the lawyer's office with a sense of dread, but also a strange determination. This wasn't going to be easy, but I couldn't back down. "Do you think family conflicts should be resolved in court, or is there another way?" I sat in my car outside Alice's house for what felt like an eternity. I hadn't planned on it taking this long to gather the strength, but I was trying to convince myself that this time would be different, that this time maybe we could talk, really talk. Maybe this time I could explain things to her in a way she'd understand. I had the letters in the passenger seat, the same ones that had opened my eyes to so much about her mother and our struggles. Maybe seeing them, hearing the truth from me, would change her mind. I couldn't keep carrying the guilt, the frustration, knowing that my daughter thought I had abandoned her when I knew in my heart that I hadn't. I finally stepped out of the car, feeling the weight of my years pressing down on my shoulders. I walked to the door and knocked gently, trying to hold on to some shred of hope. I didn't know what I was expecting, but I was ready to try one last time. The door opened, and there she was, Alice. Her eyes were colder than I had ever seen them, and she didn't step aside to let me in. Instead, she just looked at me, arms crossed, waiting for me to speak. "Alice," I began, my voice trembling with both nerves and emotion. "I know we haven't talked in a while, but I need you to understand something. I never meant to hurt you. I never abandoned you. If I did anything wrong, it was because I was lost in my own way. But I was always there, always trying. I just couldn't see how much I was failing you until it was too late." I paused, hoping she would say something, anything, but she didn't. She just stared at me, her face unreadable, and I could feel the wall between us growing higher with each passing second. "I found the letters your mother wrote. I've been reading them. She tried to protect you from the things we couldn't fix, Alice. I wasn't the father I should have been, but I never stopped loving you." I felt the emotion welling up in my chest, the tears threatening to spill. "Please, just try to understand. I wasn't trying to hurt you." Her eyes narrowed, and she shook her head slowly. "You're just trying to make excuses for what you did," she said, her voice flat and emotionless. "Mom's letters don't change anything. They don't change the fact that you were never there when I needed you." The words cut deeper than I ever imagined. Her rejection, Her dismissal of everything I had tried to say hit me like a slap. I had come here hoping for some sort of resolution, but now it was clear that nothing I could say would ever be enough. "I'm not making excuses, Alice," I said, my voice rising with frustration. "I'm telling you the truth. I never abandoned you, but I can't keep fighting for a relationship if you won't even listen." She stepped back, her face hardening. "I don't need your pity. I don't need you to explain yourself anymore. You were a terrible father, and I don't want you in my life." Those words, those cold, final words, crushed me. She didn't want me in her life. I could feel the weight of it, the finality of it all, sinking in. No matter how many times I tried to explain, no matter how much I wanted her to understand, Alice had already made up her mind. I stood there, frozen, staring at the door that she had just closed in my face. I had hoped for something more, for some understanding, but now it was clear. The emotional gap between us wasn't something I could fix. Not now, not ever. As I walked back to my car, a deep sense of resignation settled over me. I had done everything I could, but the truth was, I couldn't make Alice see what I had done for her. I couldn't change the past, and as much as it hurt to admit it, I had to accept that she might never understand the full picture of what happened. I had lost my daughter. Is it possible to heal a family rift when one person refuses to listen? What would you do? I spent the next few days in a kind of haze, going through the motions of life without ever feeling truly alive. The house was quiet, too quiet. Alice's absence was a constant ache, but it wasn't just her physical presence I missed. It was everything she used to represent. The love I thought we had, the family that I believed would always stand together. The silence around me seemed to grow louder with each passing day, a reminder of the distance between us, the distance I could never cross. I hadn't realized how much it had all weighed on me until now, until I had nothing left to give, nothing left to fight for. I had tried everything. I had reached out. I had pleaded. I had apologized, but none of it mattered. She had made her decision, and it was final. I sat alone in my living room one evening, staring at the empty chair where she used to sit. The room felt cold, even though it wasn't. I could almost hear the echo of her voice, the sound of her laughter from years ago, but it was distant now, like a memory I could never touch again. It wasn't just the loss of Alice that cut so deeply. It was everything else. The years of trying, of hoping for something different, only to realize it was never going to happen. The guilt I carried over the years of being emotionally absent, of not seeing the depth, of Helen's struggles, or the hurt Alice carried. There were things I could never undo, no matter how hard I tried. The damage was done, and I had to face it. The weight of it all felt unbearable at times. The grief I carried wasn't just about Alice. It was about the family that had been shattered. The life I had envisioned for us was slipping away, and all I could do was watch it fade. I had failed in ways I couldn't repair, and it hurt more than I could express. But in the midst of this pain, something else started to shift. It wasn't a grand moment of clarity, but a quiet realization that I couldn't keep holding on to a future that would never be. I couldn't keep wishing for Alice to come back to me, for things to be the way they once were. I had to let go of the hope for reconciliation. It wasn't that I had stopped loving her. No, that was something that would never fade. But I had to accept that I couldn't change the course she had chosen. And in that acceptance, I found a quiet strength. It wasn't the strength to fight or to keep trying to fix things that were beyond repair. It was the strength to accept the reality of the situation, to live with the consequences, and to move forward. I didn't have all the answers, and I didn't know how to heal the wound that was left in my heart. But I knew this. I had to move forward, for my own sake. I couldn't keep living in the past. Some wounds never fully heal, but they don't have to define the rest of your life. It was a slow process, a painful one, but I was learning to let go of what I couldn't change. I didn't have Alice's forgiveness, but I had to learn how to live without it. And in that, I found a quiet peace, a peace that came from accepting the things I couldn't control. Have you ever had to let go of someone you loved for your own well-being? How did you move forward? I woke up this morning with a sense of quiet peace, something I hadn't felt in a long time. The kind of peace that settles in your chest after all the noise has faded away, after the anger, the hurt, the guilt, and the regret have all been allowed to run their course. I don't know how to describe it, but it's a peace that comes with letting go, of accepting that some things are beyond your control, no matter how hard you try. The house is still quiet, just as it has been for weeks. Alice is gone from my life, and I've come to terms with that. The confrontation, the rejection, The years of trying to bridge the gap between us, it's all over. And while it still hurts, while the weight of it still lingers in my chest, I know I can't keep carrying it with me. I've spent so much of my life trying to make up for what I couldn't fix, trying to atone for the mistakes I've made as a father. But there comes a point when you have to accept that some relationships aren't meant to be repaired. You can't fix what's broken if the other person refuses to try. And I think, deep down, I've known that all along. What I've learned, through all the pain and frustration, is that self-respect is more important than seeking someone's approval. I spent years looking for validation, for forgiveness, from a daughter who wasn't ready to give it. But now, I know that my worth isn't tied to her acceptance of me. My worth is in how I handle the pain, how I move forward with dignity, even when things don't go the way I'd hoped. The past is a heavy thing to carry, and I've carried it for too long. But now, I'm putting it down. I'm letting go of the hope that Alice and I will ever find a way back to each other. The pain will always be there, but it won't control me anymore. I have to move on, for my own peace. I've been focusing more on myself, on finding joy in the little things, on taking care of my body, my mind, and my spirit. It's been hard at times to let go of the memories, but I'm learning to live in the present. I'm learning that healing doesn't always come in the form of reconciliation. Sometimes healing comes in the form of accepting what is, not what you wish it could be. I'll always love Alice. I'll always care about her. But I can't keep waiting for her to come back. I can't keep asking for something that may never happen. And that's okay. Because, in the end, the only person I can change is myself. Family, trust, and respect. They're the foundation of any relationship. But sometimes, even when you've done everything you can, the foundation crumbles, and you have to build a new one. One that is just for you, for your own peace. So I move forward, not with bitterness or regret, but with quiet strength. I've learned that peace isn't something you find in others. It's something you create within yourself. Do you believe that justice always leads to peace? Or is it a different kind of strength that helps us move on?